Hi, my name's Scott. I'm a landscape designer, and this video introduces you to the drawing tools in Sketchup. Alright, we're going to start here. We've got the origin and this guy. And in our large tool palette, which if this does not show up, you can go to View, Tool Palettes, Large Tool Set. That'll create this window to show up. We've got the drawing tools, which are these tools right here. We've got a line tool, a freehand tool, a couple of rectangle tools, polygon and circle, and a couple of arc tools. Before we start with that, we're going to learn some movements. And so the main parts of moving will be orbiting and panning. SketchUp works in a 3D space, and so you're going to click the middle mouse button to orbit, and that'll be a way to move around the model. If you hold shift while you click and hold the middle mouse button, then you can pan. So this is without shift, this is with shift. So if we need to go around the axes, we can do so like this. I would advise using a mouse with a middle roller wheel that is also a button. You can do it with a trackpad on a laptop, and then I'd recommend setting up a hotkey like I use X for orbit when I'm on a trackpad, and then Z for pan. It's a little clumsy, but when you're in a pinch and you've only got your laptop, that is a way to still move around SketchUp without a mouse. We will start with the line tool, which we can select the pen here. If we want to deselect the tool, we can hit space. We can also hit L for line, and that is going to select our line tool. So we'll start at the origin. We will single click, and now I've got a line that appears. Click around and start drawing lines. You'll see that it tends to lock into points. We want to make sure that we're closing loops, that we're typing in distances. These will be good habits that are going to pay off in later stages of using SketchUp. You can see we kind of drew this weirdly shaped almost rectangle, but it's not quite square, is it? So what if we wanted to draw something square? We'll go ahead and select it. If we have a tool selected, we can hit the arrow key or we can hit space. And if we single click, we can single click certain items of the geometry, the line or the surface. If we double click, it'll grab the surface and then the bounding box. So we'll start there with a double click, and then we'll hit delete. And now we're going to draw a perfect square. So we'll hit L. We're going to single click on the origin. We're going to drag our mouse. It's going to lock onto this red axis. Get in the habit of using the arrow keys. So you'll hit the right arrow key for the red axis. And now you'll see down here in the bottom right hand corner a distance is showing up. And we're going to make this 5 feet. So we'll type in 5 feet, and then we'll hit enter. This line is now exactly 5 feet long. And you can see that the line continues. It'll continue until we close a loop. Now if I hit space, I can double check this line. I can click it. If I go to entity info, it'll show us our length right here. So that is also helpful. If you like this window to show up, you can select these windows. These are the ones that I use the most. They are under window, entity info. If you're on the Windows version of SketchUp, this will be in a tool pane connected on the right side. Okay, so we're going to continue our box. We're going to type L for line, attach at the end. This time we're going the other direction, so we're going to use the left arrow key. And we want to go 5 feet again, but I'm going to use a different input. So I'll type in 60 for 60 inches. I don't need the inch marker. Starting unit is in inches. So if I just type in 60, enter, we now have a new line segment that is 5 feet long. And we will continue. Start at the end point, lock the red axis. Now this time, instead of typing in the distance, we're going to reference this point here. I could start at the origin, or at this point here, and visually, carefully drag the mouse until we are at this point. Or I could just hit the right arrow and it's going to lock the axis. And now I can click here, and now that line again will be perfectly 5 feet long. And now we're going to close the gap L for line, lock the node, collect, and now we've got a perfect square of 5 by 5. And if we like to see the square footage, we can click that surface and we'll see in the right hand corner 25 square feet. So it's pretty nifty that SketchUp produces this information for us. Really helpful when it comes to building proposals. So that is the line tool. Most of these tools operate the same way. So we're going to double click, delete this. Now let's move on to the Freehand tool. This is a tool I do not use very often. It's kind of like, it's pretty straightforward. Freehand tool. I don't know much about it, so I'm going to go ahead and hit E for erase, and then I'm going to select it and erase it. That's all I got for the Freehand tool. On the rectangle, we can start at the origin. This is going to be a shortcut to doing our 5 by 5 box. We can single click, we drag the mouse in the direction that we like to go, and now you'll see in the bottom right hand corner here, there's 2 distances that show up, and they are separated by a comma. So what takes a little getting used to is if you want to type in a distance, say 10 foot by 12 foot, this would be the wrong way to type it in because that X isn't going to be understood by SketchUp. Instead, you'll want to use a comma. So you go 10 foot, comma, 12 foot, 1 foot marker, hit enter, and now we have a 10 foot on this side, 12 foot on this side, square footage of 120 square feet, and now we have a 10 by 12 rectangle. Double click, hit delete. The rotated rectangle is very much the same with one additional step on the front end. What if we didn't want this rectangle square? We single click the origin, we click aside, and now you can see how we're kind of in a 3D space here. We can now do rectangles at an angle. Double click, delete. Now just as before when we were doing lines, we could lock the axis. We can do the same with the rectangle tool. So if we hit R for rectangle, it's the shortcut, and we hit the up arrow, you see how the blue line around the cursor emboldened? It is only going to be on the Z axis. If we want to change the plane, we can hit the right arrow key, and you see now we're only working on this axis. If we hit the left arrow key, now we're only on the green, almost like the green axis is going through the face of the plane. You can kind of see this right here. So it's on the face of the plane. And finally, let's say we want to reference this. I can click this arrow here. I can hit the up arrow. And let's say I want it to come out perfectly to here. Now I know that that line comes out that distance. And that's how we start using referencing to create our geometry. Now I'm going to show you one additional select method. We showed you the single click for the surface, the double click, but you see how it only got the bounding box in that surface? If we go a third click, 1, 2, 3, it'll grab everything that geometry touches. The line work. The planes don't connect. So we can hit delete. That is a way to select a lot of geometry. Select and delete that. Next we have the circle tool. You can see that C is the shortcut for this. So we'll hit C. We'll start at the axis. Again, we can control which plane we want to use the circle on. So we'll click the center of origin here. Notice that as this circle gets big, that it's made out of line segments. So in SketchUp, there are no perfect curves. Every curve and arc is made out of a series of segments. And when we draw our second circle, I'll show you how to control that. So we started the draw here. We can again lock the axes if we like. And now we can type in something like 7 feet. And now we have a 7-foot radius circle, 14-foot circle, which is an ideal circle for a fire pit patio. Now, let's say we didn't like these segments. Let's say the circle was going to be really big and we didn't want to see these individual segments. We want it to be finer. The way that we can adjust that is when we hit C for circle, you'll see down in the right hand corner the number of sides. We can control the number of sides of the circle. We could make it 12. Hit enter, circle, and now you've got a 12-sided circle. You could also space, circle, you can do something like 96. And now you've got a much more detailed circle when it comes. See, this is the same size, but you see how there's much more detail because there are more segments in the circle. That is a way to kind of control the, if you've got larger circles and you feel like that arc is showing too many flat sides, that's a way to change that. I'll hit E and I'll erase these guys. Polygon is just like the circle tool with one exception. The Polygon tool, you can select the number of sides. Let's say you want 10 sides. It will seem like the same as the circle on 2D. Let's say we pick 10 sides for the circle. The difference will be when it's pulled into 3D. This will be the push-pull tool, or P. You'll see the edges here. With the circle, you don't see the edges. It's rounded. And now we've got the 3 arc tools. The first is the center point arc. The steps will be, again, you can count the number of sides. So let's say we want another different number of sides, which, by the way, I would recommend when you pick the number of sides for your circles, if it is divisible by 12, that will be an advantage, because in later stages, if you need to divide that circle, you can divide it by both 3 and 4, which is really helpful. So we will select the arc tool, start at the origin, and we'll come out a distance of 10 feet. And now you can see that we're starting to make our arc here. And let's say I'd like this to be 120 degrees. So now I have a 120 degree arc circle. Go ahead and delete that. The second way to make an arc, and this is the most popular way to make the arc, is the 2-point arc. And so this is the arc that the shortcut is assigned to, which is the letter A. We'll type A, and then we basically pick the start of the arc, the end of the arc, and then the radius. This is particularly helpful if we have a landscape bed. We can hit A, and we need to produce some arcs for that landscape bed. Erase, and now we've got a landscape bed. And then the third arc is a 3-point arc. This is not as used as often, but it can be really helpful if you know that the arc hits on 3 different points. So this is what this enables us to do. Let's say we have a space like this, and we need to be able to hit from this corner to this corner to this corner. We could try a 2-point arc, but because it's not quite in the center, it's not really going to give us, like, we can't really get it exact. Getting it close really isn't an accurate or a good habit when you're working within SketchUp. You want to be able to lock points and get it hit exactly, otherwise the model becomes a little messy. So if I want that to hit, that's when we'd use the 3-point arc. We select the first point, you select them in a row. There's the second arc, and then here's the third arc. And now we've got a perfect arc that hits the points perfectly. We can see these spaces are separate, and that is the 3-point arc. And then finally, the pi arc is effectively the same as the first, except it closes the loop. So let's say we start at the corner here. We want it to be 140 inches, hit enter, and then we want it to come out 45 degrees, and now we've got a 45-degree arc, say maybe for a door. All right, here's the highlights. Use the arrow keys to lock the axes. When you're drawing, single click between actions instead of clicking and dragging, and then use references and type in your distances. Sketchup is a CAD program. It is not a canvas where you're painting pixels. And so if you're drawing in a way that's just close enough, it's going to cause problems. That's it.